As the milestone of American Thanksgiving looms on the horizon, we are here on Locked On NHL to discuss the biggest storylines in the NHL, including who's in a playoff spot right now that won't be at the end of the regular season.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Locked On NHL. I am Nick Zararis, the host of Locked On Oilers. That's my good friend, my co-host, Hunter Hodies, one of the co-hosts of Locked On Penguins. We want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL their first listen of the day. Locked On NHL, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So on today's show, Hunter and I have broken up some topics into our natural 3-segment categories, and we're going to start with a conversation about the state of the Metropolitan Division. The second segment, we're going to talk about the Central. And then our third and final segment of the show, we're going to try and make educated guesses as to who's in a playoff spot right now that won't end up making the playoffs at the end of the season. So coming into the season, the Metro on paper looked about as weak as it has maybe since this format, since we've come to this divisional format for the postseason back in 2014, 2015. It's been a while since there was this much, I don't want to say parity because that's not the right word, this much bleh, for lack of a better term, in the middle and the bottom. Rangers, Carolina, and the Devils very clearly all probable playoff teams. But after that, it was a mighty big toss-up. And right now, it's not an exaggeration to say Carolina's been more impressive, even though the Rangers have a pretty good record and have a bit better playoff track record than them. Carolina's clearly looked the best. The Devils are still kind of working out the kinks. Washington has been better than I expected them to be. But for the most part, the bottom half of the division is what it was supposed to be.
Right. You have the 4 teams that are probably going to make the playoffs this year in the top 4 of that division, and I don't really think they're going to be sliding down to the bottom 4 at all. And then, Nick, you have the bottom 4, which are flat out not good teams. I mean, the Flyers are not good this year. The Blue Jackets are really struggling. The Penguins have said that almost everyone is open for trade except mainly a few core guys. Sidney Crosby, I don't think Evgeny Malkin is getting traded. Chris Letang, probably Erik Karlsson, I don't think are going anywhere either. And then you have the Islanders, who I also think are kind of stuck in purgatory a little bit. I don't really think they've just chosen which direction they want to go. They're just kind of stuck in the middle. You have the top 4 teams. They are either contenders or they are just really good playoff teams. You know, the Capitals, I agree, they are better than expected. Their depth is performing really well this year. Alex Ovechkin has been shot out of a cannon to start the season. You remember last year, he was struggling a little bit to get it going. This year, that hasn't been the case at all. He's been awesome. They've been getting really good goaltending from both Lindgren and Thompson. And Spencer Carberry has really established himself as one of the better coaches in the league, in my opinion. The front office, they saw what didn't work last year, and they were like, okay, we're going to go out and make some changes to this roster and bring in some more impact players to at least get this team to the playoffs and make them more fun to watch as Ovechkin goes to the record. You're seeing that on display throughout the season. Carolina, I agree. They definitely are better than I expected them to, because I thought they were going to take a bit of a step back considering the amount of talent that they lost heading into the season. But it always helps when Marty Necas is at 25 points in 15 games. He's been shot out of a cannon. Sebastian Aho and Svechnikov, they're both at a point per game. Seth Jarvis has been very good. Gostisbehere has performed really well for Carolina as well. I didn't really see that coming as much heading into this year. But also, Jack Roslovic, Nick, 9 goals in 15 games. They're getting goal scoring from every line, and that's making them so dangerous to play. The Rangers, they're going to be fine. They're going to make the playoffs, but they have been struggling a little bit this year, Nick. I think the biggest thing there, Mika Zibanejad really needs to get it going. He hasn't really been performing that well. He did not play well against the Winnipeg Jets the other night, even though I felt that was a very good game. I felt Zibanejad was responsible for at least a couple of goals against, where he was kind of just fumbling with the puck in his own zone, wasn't good in transition. So he needs to be better. But overall, I think when you look at the Metro, it's going mostly as we thought it would, even though there's a couple of surprises. But you can easily see who the playoff teams are versus who the meh to just bad teams are in this division.
Yeah, completely agree with you. So let's go team by team here. The thing with the Rangers is the defense. As much as Zibanejad and Trocheck, who is getting away with flying under the radar because he had a good playoffs last year, Trocheck only has 4 even strength points. I know they've only played 14 games. The Rangers have a lot of games in hand against some of their divisional contemporaries, but Trocheck and Zibanejad are both kind of struggling. Their third line with Filipino has been very good for them in the playoffs, in the regular season so far this year. And their defense has been an issue. I think the lines and the pairs that I saw for morning skate are closer to what they need to be, but I still think the Rangers definitely have a move to make. They need to solidify their back end, and they need to find a way to get back to 2 steady defensive pairs. For Carolina, you lose Gensel, who you thought you were going to keep, in all honesty, based on the early reports off season. You lose Brady Shea, you lose Brett Pesce, you have to replace an entire defensive pair, and you do a really good job in scoping out the bargain bin once again. You bring in Sean Walker and you bring in Shane Gostisbehere, and they both fit very well for what Carolina wants to do. Now, Carolina is going to have the same issues they always do once the playoffs come around, but Carolina has got this regular season thing figured out. For the Devils, they need to get into a rhythm. It's been a lot of stop and start where, they got shut out by the Sharks, but then went and beat the Panthers the following game, where they're still very much trying to figure out who they are and what they want to be. Their goaltending has been decent. And frankly, as long as they have decent goaltending with all of the talent they have, it's been nice to see Timo Meier get going after what was a really difficult first full season in New Jersey last year. And then for Washington, this is a really good case study, for lack of a better term, in how you manage a roster as you wind down a window of contention. Nobody's operating here under the illusion that the Capitals are Stanley Cup contenders, but they absolutely can make the playoffs. And if they get a good matchup, I could see them be winning a round if everything breaks right for them. It's not out of the question. And you had said, Ovechkin had 8 goals at the All-Star break last year. It looked like it was genuinely going to be the first time he didn't break 30 in a full season. And then he got going. He had 20-something in the second half, got over the 30-goal mark again. But he looks a lot better, even with the injuries. Chikrin's been hurt. Matt Roy, who they brought in, has been hurt. And at a certain point, winning is kind of infectious, and you start to get why can't we do this mindset? And that was the case for them for stretches of last season, but I really do feel that's the case now. And as for the bottom half, the only team I kind of expected to be better than they're playing so far is Pittsburgh, just because of the talent. But it's very clear that it's not clicking on multiple levels. The reports that they want to start Yari on the road on his comeback so he doesn't have the crowd on him is a little bit concerning. The defense just being absolutely horrendous every game. The Penguins are not built to be a high event hockey team, but all of their games are extremely chaotic, and there are a lot of scoring chances in both directions. And then on the bottom, Columbus, Philadelphia, wasn't expecting a whole lot from that duo.
No, I didn't really expect them to be in the conversation to make the playoffs. Everything went right for Philadelphia until the end of the season last year. And then you saw them playing at the level we thought they were going to play at for most of last season. And then that's carried over into this season, where the way they're playing right now, again, is the way we thought they were going to play for most of last season. So this is the Flyers team that I think a lot of people expected. Yeah, for the Penguins, their team defense has been atrocious all year. And Erik Karlsson been very up and down. Chris Letang, his skating is completely gone right now, which sucks to say because I've been a fan of his ever since he came into the league. He's the best franchise defenseman in the history of their franchise, and he's accomplished so much for them. So it sucks seeing a lot of his game rot away. But I think the biggest thing for them is they need a coaching change. I don't think they want to do it right now. I think Kyle Dubas and the ownership group really like Mike Sullivan, but I think it's beyond time for it to happen because I think the message has gone stale. Will Mike Sullivan get another job in 5 minutes? Probably. I think he is still one of the better coaches in this league. There'll be teams that come calling when they fire a coach either in season or after the season is over. But I feel like still it's not working. He can say all he wants about how I want to see this through. I want to get this team back on track. But right now, I think he just passed his expiration date at this point. I still feel like, we're going to bring up the rankings here in a second. I think New Jersey, when they're clicking, is the best team in this division. I think they have quite a bit of talent. They have a fine head coach. They have decent goaltending. They're good on the back end. I feel like when they are clicking, and they have at least at times this season, you saw that against the Panthers especially, I think they are the best team in this division.
That's a reasonable take. I don't disagree with you so far. I think the Rangers' issues are a lot more fundamental than the Devils, where it's a little more performance-based. So we're going to take our first break of today's episode, and when we come back, we're going to tackle the NHL's Central Division. So be sure to stick around. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. This week in the NFL tonight, we've got a pretty good NFC East game between Jaden Daniels and the Commanders going up to Philly to take on Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, where the Eagles are 3.5-point favorites. But the main course is Sunday afternoon. The Chiefs going up to Buffalo to take on Josh Allen and the Bills. The Bills are 2.5-point home favorites. And then on Sunday Night Football, Burrow versus Herbert, where the Chargers are 1.5-point favorites out in LA. So head on over to FanDuel.com, where you can get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. It's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends at SelectQuote, the World Series, Super Bowl, Olympics. The world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing: teamwork. Teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. SelectQuote is one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, helping over 2 million customers find over $700 billion in coverage since 1985. You invest so much time to take care of yourself and to be the healthiest, best version of you. SelectQuote's exclusive policies can reward that effort. If you are in good health, they work with carriers that can get you same-day coverage for up to $5 million, no medical exam required. SelectQuote. They shop, you save. Get the right life insurance for you for less at SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL. Go to SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL today to get started. One more time. That's SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL so they know we sent you. Thank you to everyone who's hanging out here with Hunter and I on this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL, where we're making our way through the NHL Power Rankings as voted on by the host. So I'm going to flash the graphic up on the screen so our friends watching on YouTube can tell us, Hunter. The Minnesota Wild were voted third in the entire NHL, which I don't want to say entirely out of left field, but kind of entirely out of left field. You know, coming into the season, there wasn't an expectation for the Wild to be this good. Frankly, you know, coming into the season, there was real conjecture as to whether or not the Wild would even make the playoffs, let alone play this well.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest reason, again, Kirill Kaprizov, he has been electric to start this season. He's definitely, in my opinion right now, one of the finalists for the Hart Trophy. And if you were to give him the Hart Trophy right now, I don't think anyone would bat an eye. Philip Gustafsson in net, he has also been much better this year compared to last year. I felt like heading into this season, if the Wild wanted to do anything, they needed to get better goaltending from their starting netminder. And so far, he has delivered. Their depth has also been really shining throughout the season. They're well coached this season as well. They're playing well in their own zone. This is a very good hockey team right now. And if they can sustain this, they're going to be a pretty tough out in the playoffs. You also look at the Central right now, a couple other teams. I mean, Nick, we got to talk about it, man. The Winnipeg Jets, best start in NHL history, 15-1. They are just absolutely kicking everyone's butts on a nightly basis. I was watching that game against the Rangers the other night, and that Gabe Vilardi play was disgusting. It was just nasty, awesome to watch. And when you are getting contributions from your top guys, Kyle Connor, Nikolai Ehlers, but then players like Vilardi, you know, Scheifele's been great. You're getting good contributions from both of your top pairings. Hellebuck has been a god in net. you are going to be a very tough team to beat. And that's exactly what you're seeing right now. They play very good defense in their own zone. And while they have had a little bit of trouble in the playoffs at times, this is still, I think, the best Jets team I've seen in quite a while. And I know they might run into some matchup problems in the playoffs if they play a team like the Stars or if Colorado gets more healthy, for example. But right now, in my opinion, this is the best team in hockey. It's not close. They're playing great. And speaking of Colorado, Nick, we are starting to see them get going. Yeah, I know they're 19th in the power rankings, but they've won 3 in a row. Ranson had a hat trick on Wednesday night. He is all the way back. I mean, he's always been back, but still, he's a little bit of a slow start, but he's been really good these last several games. But Colorado, you're starting to see them figure it out, even though they've been pretty banged up throughout this season. Also, Dallas, 9-5. They just destroyed the Penguins the other night to start this week, 7-1, 6 goals in the first period. They are totally fine. But then you have the rest of that division. St. Louis, they've lost 3 in a row, 7 of 10. They're kind of in a spot where we expect them to be this year. Chicago, kind of the same thing. Utah, they're hovering around a playoff spot in the wild card chase, but then we got to discuss it as well. Nashville, losers of 6 out of their last 10. Every time it feels like they're going to get it going after one win, it just goes completely back to the way they play to start the season. And at this point, man, I don't know if they're going to figure this out.
So what we're going to talk about this in the next segment, because one of the questions we have to ask is if someone who's in a playoff spot right now is going to fall out, who's going to fall into one? And for Nashville, I think this is a testament to the challenges of team building. And then the other part of that is successfully integrating, because you and I talk about this all the time, Hunter, and we talk about this theoretically, the idea that a team can be talented, but if the pieces don't fit together, it doesn't really matter. You know, you can be a very talented team and it just doesn't work. We see that happen relatively frequently in all of sports, where you can put together a really talented roster and the players don't fit the scheme, the players don't fit well with each other, and it just doesn't work. You know, what made Brunette's team last year, the Panthers team, a couple years ago that won the President's Trophy with him as the interim, so effective, was playing with tempo. And Nashville's not a fast team. If you look at the skating ability, you know, Ryan O'Reilly, Stamkos, Marchessault, even Philip Forsberg. Forsberg's the best skater of that grouping, but none of those guys is, you know, hanging with Matt Barzal or Jack Hughes in a straight line race. You know, when you are a team that is predicated on offensive zone chaos and putting pressure on the other team, and you're kind of slow and your defense is struggling to move the puck to some degree outside of Yossi, it's weird, because on paper, Nashville is a lot better than this, but it's not working. And then real quick on the Jets, I do want to get this in. They don't really make mistakes. They play very sound, fundamental hockey, and they keep their game simple. And that sounds very much like Eddie Olczyk analysis, which I hate doing, but they move the puck. They're responsible with the puck. They get it in deep. Their bottom six is really effective at cycling. They minimize the amount of defense they need to play. And then when they do need to play defense, they've got decent individual talent. And you've got Hellebuck as the eraser to plug in any gaps. You know, it's a really solid regular season formula. The Jets, I think the Jets definitely need to go out and get themselves another top 6 forward, because the more talent you add to that group, the better. I liked how aggressive they were last year in trying to improve their roster, adding Tyler Toffoli as early as they did. He fit in very nicely for them. Sean Monahan fit in very nicely for them last year. I definitely think they have a move or two to make, but that's part of the fun. We're very early on, and you want to see, can Winnipeg do this? You know, they've only been to the conference final once in the entire time since they've relocated. And that, in my opinion, is probably the best version of the Jets 2.0, where they probably should have beaten Vegas, but they were so shot from the series, the series before against Nashville, which is still one of the best playoff series of recent memory. So we're going to take one more quick break on today's show.
I think, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. They're going to be a bit aggressive, I feel like, at that deadline. I feel like Winnipeg this year, they're going to be in on a lot of big names, and rightfully so. This is the best team they've had in quite some time. You want to be aggressive, especially when you are the best team, not just in the Western Conference, but in the NHL as a whole. And just to go off your Eddie Olczyk comment, I also want to correct myself, because I did say Ranson had a little bit of a slow start, had a case of the Mondays there. Dude had a hat trick to end the season. That just came to me as you were talking. So again, don't know what the heck I was talking about there. I apologize. He's been great. He's had a couple of down moments only for a couple of games, but he's been awesome as of late. Just wanted to correct myself because I sounded like a complete buffoon with that last statement.
Fact checking is good. That's why we're good at our jobs. We'll be right back after this quick break where we're going to wrap up talking about who's in a playoff spot right now that won't be come April. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. You can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. If you were to open the PrizePicks app or go over to the PrizePicks website, you could do whether Jaden Daniels is going to throw for more than 227.5 passing yards, if Terry McLaurin's going to have more than 63.5 receiving yards, if Luka Doncic is going to have more than 47.5 points, rebounds, and assists combined. So head on over to PrizePicks or download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Remember, download the app and use code LOCKEDONNHL so they know we sent you to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out with Hunter and I as we make our way through the early phases of the NHL season. And this stat has changed ever so slightly in volatility. The number has gone up in recent years because when Elliot Friedman first wrote about this, I want to say 7 or 8 years ago at this point, it was about 80% of the teams that were in playoff spots on American Thanksgiving ultimately ended up making the postseason. Last year, it was 14 out of 16 teams that were in playoff spots on American Thanksgiving that ultimately ended up qualifying for the postseason. As we sit here right now, the playoff teams are as follows. The Panthers, the Leafs, and the Bruins, the Devils, the Hurricanes, the Capitals, the Rangers. I don't know who has the tiebreaker between the Islanders and the Senators, but they both have 16 points. I would assume it's the Senators because of regulation wins.
It is the Senators, correct.
Yeah. In the West, it's Winnipeg, Minnesota, Dallas in the Central, Vegas, LA, Vancouver, the Flames, and then the Oilers are tied with, the Avalanche, and then the Oilers are the first team out. I'm going to go out on a limb and say in the East that more likely than not, the Senators will not be in a playoff spot come the end of the regular season. And that's it, at least for the Eastern Conference. And then we'll talk about the West after. But I think only Ottawa falls out.
I would agree. Yeah, Florida's getting in. Toronto's getting in. I know Boston has had a really rough start to the season, but Nick, we keep saying
better than Ottawa.
Until they actually miss the playoffs, I am going to predict this team to make the playoffs. It's the Boston Bruins, Marchand, Pastrnak, et cetera, et cetera. So they're in the spot right now. I think that's going to remain the case for the rest of the season. The Devils, I think, will get in. The Hurricanes will get in. The Capitals, the Rangers will get in. I would agree. If I had to pick one team that is not in the playoffs at the end of the season, I would go with Ottawa. I don't think the Islanders are going to get in. I think if one team that replaces the Senators, I'm going to go with the Lightning. I think the Lightning will get in. I think they have a higher bar to reach than where they've started the season. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say Tampa Bay still gets in over Ottawa.
We saw that last year where it took Tampa Bay a little while to get going.
Right.
You know, there was that game last year where Braden Point got benched the entire third period where John Cooper was trying to do anything to light a spark into his team. So I would agree with you. If I had to pick right now, as we sit here on November 14th, that Tampa Bay probably replaces Ottawa. Because other than that, I still feel Boston is better than they've played, so they're going to get in. Washington has played well enough that I think they've built enough of a points cushion to stay in front of Ottawa. I don't think Detroit or Buffalo is going on a run. I suppose the Islanders could get on a heater. They've done that each of the last 2 years where they've started really slow and then gotten better as the season's gone along. So if I had to suggest the second team in the East other than Tampa Bay to pass Ottawa, I could see the Islanders as well. And then out West, I feel pretty confident in saying that I don't think the Flames are going to be in a playoff spot at the end of the year. And it wouldn't shock me if the Kings weren't either. It wouldn't shock me if we ended up with two different teams out West. If we ended up with, say, Edmonton in one of the Pacific Division spots, and then more likely than not, If I had to pick a second team, it probably has to be Utah just based on the standings, because I don't think the Blues, Blackhawks, or Predators are capable of going on a crazy run. I suppose the Predators could. The Predators last year with not a lot of talent went on that crazy winning streak. They went on that 12-game winning streak last year. So I suppose it could be Nashville. But right now, I think it's really just swapping the two Alberta teams.
Yeah, right now, Winnipeg, they're going to get in. Minnesota, they keep this up, they're 100% getting in.
They've also built themselves a cushion where if they get cold for a while, they'll have a 2-week cushion to be okay.
Right. I mean, and you look at the standings, they're 10-2-3. They're 6 points up on the Oilers right now, who are the first team out of the playoffs. Though, again, I don't think that's going to last. So they're good right now. Dallas, they'll get in. Vegas, a lot of people wrote off Vegas this year, Nick. I don't understand. They have the high-end talent. They have the depth. Defensively, they're very good. Bruce Cassidy's a great head coach. They get at least passable goaltending. This was always going to be a very good team again. I can understand some of the takes that are saying, oh, they're not maybe a bona fide contender, not one of the 3 to 4 best teams in the league, but this was always going to be, I felt like, a playoff team. So I think they're definitely going to make the playoffs. This roster is still very good, and they're always lurking out there trying to make more moves. I think they're going to be aggressive once again at the deadline. The Canucks, I think they'll get in. The Kings, I wasn't high personally on the Kings heading into this year, but they've played better than expected. Kopitar has been awesome to start this season in particular. And the Kings, they're kind of just like, how do I want to describe it? They're low-key like cockroaches. Like, it's hard to get rid of them. They're
kind of like the Bruins. They're kind of like the Bruins, yeah.
Honestly, yeah. Like, that might go down as kind of a bad take for me because I didn't really expect much from the Kings this year. Colorado, I think they'll still get in. Calgary, if I had to pick one team that comes out, I do think it's Calgary. They've lost 7 of their last 10. Edmonton has started to get it going ever so slightly. They've won 6 of the last 10 games, including 2 in a row. McDavid has been great recently. Draisaitl has been awesome as well. They're going to get into the playoffs, I think. I think if one team comes out, it's Calgary.
I agree with you. Calgary's a nice story. I hope they stay competitive because it's going to be a long season. And frankly, it's going to be a long few seasons for them. It's nice to see Huberdeau playing with a pulse, but I'll be curious to see whether or not they bite the bullet and start selling off, even if they stay in a playoff spot. That was a real point of conjecture last year was they went on a heater right around the trade deadline. And they still ultimately ended up doing the right thing, trading Lindholm, trading Zadorov. Zadorov was in December, but you get what I'm saying. Trading Hanifin, of course. So I'll be curious to see if they are serious about trading Rasmus Andersson. They're going to get a nice return for him because he's a really solid number 3 defenseman. Frankly, could probably be a number 2 if you've got a really good first guy to kind of carry the load. But yeah, it feels like we're almost locked in already. We're struggling to find 2 teams to come in and 2 teams to come out. And it's not even the third week in November yet. It really feels like we're kind of already pretty close to what it's going to be for the next 5 months.
I agree. And here's a good question for you. Say Nashville does go on a big run here. They're able to figure this out. Who do you think they'd be able to knock out of this current bracket right now?
In a playoff series or just past them?
No, for a playoff spot, excuse me.
For a playoff spot, probably. So I'm imagining in my head that Edmonton is going to get to one of the 3 divisional spots. I imagine they're going to pass LA at least, and they very well could pass Vancouver as well, which would bump Vancouver or LA down. I think Nashville could conceivably get ahead of LA. I think Nashville could probably get ahead of Minnesota if Minnesota goes on a real cool streak. But I think Nashville has really, really put themselves in an untenable position because remember, it took the Oilers going on a 15-game winning streak to get back in the mix last year and an 8-game winning streak. The Oilers went on 15 and 8-game winning streaks last year. The 15-gamer was in November through early December, and the 8-gamer was in February. Unless Nashville is capable of rattling off, 13 or 14 in a row here, it's a long climb. I'll do the math and report back next week what the Predators are going to need points percentage-wise to make the playoffs the rest of the season. But it's going to be close to probably 70% of the available points if they want to make the playoffs. I mean, they're sitting here on November 14th with a 375 points percentage. They have 12 points through, what is that? How many games? They've played 16 games, so they have 66 games remaining. So you probably need at least 85 points if you want to have a serious chance. And you're talking, you probably need to win 40 of the final 60 games if you want to make the play, if you want a real chance. And that's not undoable. 40 out of 60 is possible. It's just going to be really difficult. I'll do the actual maths before next Thursday, after the next couple Predators games, and we'll have a more in-depth discussion about Nashville, because they are easily the most interesting team so far. And unfortunately, it's for the wrong reasons. But that'll do it for today's show. Hopefully, everybody enjoyed today's show. If you could be so kind, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please throw the show a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the alarm bell so you get a notification whenever new content goes live. Hunter and I will talk to you guys next week. Everybody have a safe and fun weekend.